Welcome back to Sawdust and Brushstrokes. Today we're going to be making another barn quilt. Earlier this year I made another barn quilt with the same design, but it was much larger. Now I've been asked to make a smaller version of it. The barn quilt I'm making today is approximately 24 inches square. I start out by measuring every 3 inches. I do this vertically and horizontally, and then I draw lines. After that I end up with 64 small squares. Once I have my lines drawn out, I start to paint. I decided to start out with the brown squares. Throughout this video you'll see me use painter's tape sometimes, and then sometimes I don't. I'm not a huge fan of painter's tape because it leaves a rough line on this rough palette wood. So most of the time I just freehand it, following the pencil line. Next I do the larger diagonal squares. To get the diagonal lines, at this time I used painter's tape, but you could use a ruler and just draw a line. You match up all the corners and then you draw a line. That's how you get the diagonal lines. Now moving on to the darker gray areas. I use the same method as before. I line up the corners and make a line to know where my diagonal lines go. Now it's time to paint the lighter gray areas. This is exactly the same as before, it's just opposite of the dark gray areas. I finish up by painting the remaining areas white. These boards actually already had white paint on them, but I went ahead and touched them up because I wanted it to be a solid white. After I finished the white and it had time to dry, I took a sander and I roughed up the boards. I love my barn quilts to be really rough and antiqued looking. After that, I took a very diluted brown and I washed it over the entire side and then wiped it off with a cloth to give it a more antique look. So here's the finished product. My very last step was to give it a coat of Mod Podge to protect the paint. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you join me next time.